Hello everyone, let me introduce your YouTube channel called Animart. These videos are primarily for those users who have experience with Blender before, so they are aware of the basics of this program. We also recommend these videos for all users who have gained experiences in other 3D softwares and wish to explore Blender. We do our best to introduce the functions to you with additional comments regarding to what happens on the screen. Of course, it may be useful for absolute beginners as well, in case if they are able to create at least a cube or a monkey's head. Most importantly, you will be able to do all these things by your own and deliberately. Because sometimes you just need a lot of things in order or inordinately. Sure, you could just do the copy-paste method repeatedly. However, there are more elegant and accurate ways to do that, not to mention the advantages of all these techniques. We summarized 8 of these for you. Let's start it. Before we start, let's talk a little about the various sense of all kinds of copy-paste. Possibly you are already familiar with the opening image of Blender. So we got a camera, a light, and a cube. By the way, to avoid future confusions, we are going to start with the same setup in the further scenes. As you can see in the upper right section of the outliner, the cube is active right now. We are in the object mode, so we duplicated it by the Ctrl+C plus Ctrl+V command. So it's pasted to the same section as the original exemplar. It seems clear by simply moving it. There is a similar shortcut for such case, which is the command Shift-D. By pressing these two buttons, we are able to freely move the clone in the space which synchronized with the camera, so it's not a precise solution but fast. Therefore, we can move it all around. To be more accurate, after marking and pressing Shift-D and by adding an axis, we can only move the cube to a certain direction. These are the X, Y, Z directions and the X, Y, Z buttons which belong to them. For example, if you want to move on the Y-axis, just press Y, and whatever you do after that, the cube won't be able to move anywhere else but on the Y-axis. In case if you're an absolute beginner and you're unfamiliar with the directions, the compass in the upper right corner would help you out. So if you wish to move upward, you just need to press Z after the Shift-D command. It's okay if you move the cube to another direction before that, because by pressing the Z button it jumps straight to the right position. After that you can only move it up and down. We can do it centimeter accurate, but first let's check the unit system setups in the scene properties and switch the length to centimeter. The default cube's parameter is 200 × 200 centimeters. For example, if you want the cube to be on the top of the other cube, then press Shift-D and the Z-axis, then type 200 and press Enter. After that, it will be located exactly where we want it to be. After this warm-up, let's check out a real classic which can be found in almost every 3D software. This is the array. In Blender, this is a modifier that you can find right here. That's where we add the object to multiply. By using the default setup, we can decide where we want them to be and how many of them are needed. Here you can just set the counts, and in the relative offset section, so we set the distance between the clone and the basic object. The relative offset is relative compared to the original object, so the object size can be taken as one unit. Therefore, by setting 1, we can move one whole object unit on the specified axis. The axis in subject can be seen here. So, if we want to place a cube onto another cube, then we need to set the number 1 on the Z-axis. Beside that, the constant offset can be also activated, and we can shift the object by measurement, in this case in centimeter. Alternatively, we can adjust a fixed length so it won't go beyond the desired length. By using a helper object, we gain access to other setups. First, we add an empty object to it, like sphere. It is empty only because it can be seen in the render. Here we increase the size of it so it becomes more visible. Then we go back to our clones, and in the offset object, by using the pipette, we pick up the previously added helper object. Seemingly nothing happened, but from now on, the empty object is functioning like a controller. So we have a chance to set the direction and the angle of the replication. The new clone always moves relative to the previous one based on the parameters. Let's check a practical example, the creation process of a chain. First, we need to create a chain link by adding a torus, which is a primitive object. After that, in edit mode, by marking and moving it, we shape it to a chain link, and that becomes our takeoff. We add the array modifier to it. We know that we want to go along the y-axis, so we set the measure of x to 0 and y to 1. We can refine it by setting a constant offset. After that, we will need to set the helper object that orders the next chain link to turn 90 degrees compared to the other one. Then we will add an empty sphere to the scene. Now we can see where the object moves and turns. However, it's not visible in the render. Then we pick it up. Seemingly nothing happened because now we are about to rotate the empty sphere which affects our clone. By using snap, we set it to 90 degrees. From this point, no matter how we set it up, because it will do the rotation compared to the previous object. The empty objects not just can be rotated, but the clones also react to move. So it can be improved, and it's possible to create different formations. Another useful function is that we can do replication along a previously drawn curve. It's called fit curve. It's called fit because it affects the full length. The curve may be closed or opened. Now we add a closed circle. It cannot be visible at the moment, so let's increase the size of it. Back to array. Let's pick up the curve that we just added. Nothing's happened so far because in Blender we will need to add a curve modifier placed under array. Once again, we need to pick the previously added curve. Now our cube has been moved onto the curve as we desired. By the previously showed offsets, we will be able to set the distances. In case if we don't see what we expected, then we may need to set the deformation axis due to wrong setup. In such case, the X is the solution. That's how it looks if we set a different direction. It may be useful to try what happens if we move or rotate the initial object. At last, let me show you a tip to array. You can add more arrays one after another. In this case, the new array will always take the previous one as a default setup. It can be very useful, especially if we want to build a brick wall, for example. For instance, let's create the first row by adding the count by 1 unit distance on the y-axis and insert a small gap with constant offset. Then we add another array to this. Be aware that it has been moved beneath the previous one, so don't do any amok run in the upper section. Simply close it and scroll it down. We want to move the row upside, so z-axis is set to 1 unit and x needs to be set back to 0. With constant offset we can shift a few additional centimeters. The brick wall looks different to this one. The next row is slightly shifted compared to the previous one, so we need to shift it a little more on the y-axis. After that we add another one. We will see not 2 but 4, then 8, then 16, etc. In a few steps we will be able to create a complete wall. It might happen that we would need individual brick stones in case if we want to demolish that wall. For that they need to exist individually because at the moment it's functioning as one solid block. First step, we need to finalize the arrays on our object. In order to do that, we need to be in object mode and then press apply. Now we got all the cubes on one single object. For the next step, we switch to edit mode. All the polygons are active. Within mesh, we choose separate by loose. When we switch back to object mode, you will see that all cubes exist individually. Be aware that every pivot is at the same position. The solution is Object, Set Origin, Origin to Geometry. For those who have used ZBrush before, it might be familiar as Nanomash, when we use the surface of another object for replicating a certain object. More exactly, we replicate the clone onto each polygons. So we are gonna need two objects on which we want to put something. Let's take a monkey's head as an example to replicate it. We are adding an icosphere into the same position. The surface of icosphere is meant to be used for replication. What we want to put in, it should be at the top of the hierarchy and the other one should be under that. For the connection, I select the object that I want to clone first, then the object where I want the clone to be. And finally, the Ctrl+P command, we connect them together. On the right hand side, at the object properties below, instancing, we choose faces. The clones show up, and by activating Scale by Face Size, we are able to adjust the size of it. If we don't want the icosphere to be visible, just turn it off by Display Instancer. If we take the basic object and rotate it, the clone will do exactly the same thing according to that command. There may be one other thing to do in order to make each clones to be individual ones. For this, press Ctrl+A, then click below on Make Instances Real. From now on, they exist individually. Perhaps this is one of the simplest solutions. Now we switch to Edit mode. The entire surface needs to be active. Then press Alt+E. We choose Extrude Repeat. Nothing's happened, so we are gonna open the window in the left corner below. Now we set the direction and the amount. That's exactly what you could see when we were talking about array. You can also set up the offset here. You will also find the icon of another multiplier here called spin. I will tell you more about it in the next video. After activating the edit mode, press Alt+E, then below click on spin. We have mentioned spin in the previous topic. There is an easier access to it. Let's mark the object and switch to edit mode. You will find spin duplicates in tools, and also you can find spin here. First, in the right upper corner, you will set the axis and the amount in tools. By clicking the plus symbol on the circle, we start to rotate it. In the left corner below, let's open that window. In the upper section, we will move the axis. Below that, we spin it until we get the desired results. For the separation, all the polygons are active. Now we choose Mesh, Separate by Loose Parts. For object cloning, we can also use the hair system. Hair is part of the particle system. Now I'm going to show you the simplest way to use this part. First, we need to create a divided plane, also known as grid. Then set the resolution. If we open that and turn wireframe on, you will see that. Let's switch to weight paint mode and highlight it with red color where the clones are. Blue won't be visible here. We can set the color contrast also here. Now let's switch back to object mode. Despite it's not visible, the paint is still on it. At vertex groups, by clicking on density, we can choose the self-created weight group. Now we can see that the hair grows only from where we have painted before. We can set the number of the clones in the section called Emission. At source, we can set whether it should originate from face or vertex. For the replication, we will need another object, maybe a cone. Let's reduce the size of it to a manageable dimension and pull it aside so it won't be distracting. Now we switch back to the hair system. At the render setups, instead of the path, we will choose the object. That's when everything disappears because we need to pick up the instance object with the pipette. They are visible now because of the adjustments on the marked vertex. Now they are lying down, so let's activate the object rotation. We switch to the object and then we rotate it by 90 degrees by snapping it with Ctrl. By using scale slider, we can increase the size. We can detach it into individual objects by the previously explained way. Press Ctrl plus A, then make instances real. By adding the mirror modifier, we are able to do limited replications. Let's add a mirror modifier to the object. For better visibility, let's shift the object, then add empty object to it. We switch back and at the mirror adjustments, we pick the added empty sphere. Set the exact location on the axis for the mirroring. The mirrored clone is visible only on the y-axis because the empty object provides us the axis of the mirror so we can shift it away. So now the clones are visible. With this you can create interesting animations by using keyframe. Of course you can add further mirrors to this which duplicate the previous levels. This is an odd one out because it just contains shortcuts. It might be interesting for you. First, let's pull our object away from the 3D cursor. By a single click, we can move the pivot onto the 3D cursor. After using the Shift plus D command for duplication. Then press R, that stands for rotation, and press Z, which stands for axis. Let's type, for example, 45, which means degree here. Now we activate it, so press Enter. The Shift plus R combination is always the repetition of the last step until the circle closes. And finally, not an actual mesh, but a group can be replicated. Let's say that we take a sphere just beside our cube. I pull it out so you can see it. Click on Outliner in the right upper corner, choose Create New Collection. Click twice and name it Group 1. Now we drag these two objects in it. In Object Mode, Add Collection Instance. Here we click on Group 1. You can see the instance in the hierarchy. It has been created onto the same position. Let's pull it away for visibility. Therefore, any number but always only one can be added at a time. I show you a trick. We open a new collection which becomes Group 2. We put all the groups and instances into this one. From now on, by choosing Group 2, it will contain all of it. This can go on and on. Why is instance a good thing? If you add anything additionally or take anything from the base, it will have an impact on everything. Let's take a cylinder in the scene and add it in the first group. From here, it will appear in all because it's referenced. It's really cool because it's acting like a proxy and doesn't even increase the polygon numbers in the scene, as you can see it right below here. If you think something was missing, let us know in the comment section. Thanks for watching.